In previous chapter we learned that to implement conditional updates we can use either e-tag or last modified date. In this chapter we will write a program to implement conditional updates using e-tag. To do that, as usual, I have copied all the existing codes from response codes project. So here you have everything which we have already written, and we will modify the existing code. So if I go back to student register class that we have already written, so the first thing you need to have is that your get student details function, which basically gives the response of the get request, returns the entity tag. So to do that you use entity tag class, new entity tag, and here I will pass an identifier something like this. It is the hash code of the student object. Now hash code of the student object will change every time you create a new student object. I don't want that. What I want is that if any value in the student object is changing, then its hash code should change. So to do that, let me override the hash code function in the student object. So here I have overridden hash code function. As you can see that what I'm doing here is I'm concatenating roll number, name and age, and I'm getting this string and I'm returning the hash code of this string, which means that if roll number, name or age or any of this attribute changes, then this hash code value will change. Now that you have entity tag, you will add this entity tag in the response builder object using tag function. Now let us build and run this project. Now if I call this function, get function, you see that it is returning the body as usual. In the header you can also see that it is returning e tag, so it is returning a string. Now the next step obviously is that in your put request you should send this string, and at the server side this function update student details, which caters the put request, should handle this e tag value and should use this e tag value to evaluate the precondition and to know if the e tag value has changed after the get response was sent. So to do that, first thing is that you need to add a request context here, because we use the evaluate preconditions method, which is part of request context. So let's use this annotation, context request, and then you can add this request parameter. Now in this method you are reading this student register file and populating this student map with all the records in that file. What I want to do here is that I want to get the student record of the roll number which is coming in the request, and then I want to know what is the present entity tag value. So to do that, I have created this object student1, in which I have stored the the record of that student for which the roll number is same what is coming in the request. Now I want to get the entity tag of this object student1. So as you can see here, I am getting the entity tag for student1 object. Now this student1 object, if we have not changed anything in the student register, then you should get the same entity tag what you are getting in the header of the request. Now the next step is that you call this evaluate preconditions method with and pass this entity tag. This method will compare the entity tag which you obtained for this record, which is the current entity tag which you got for the record which is in the student register, and the entity tag which is coming in the request header. It will compare the two, and if that validation passes, which means that if entity tag which comes in the header and this entity tag is same, then this will return a null value. But if this precondition fails, then it will return a non-null value. Basically it will return a status suggesting that evaluate precondition has failed. So if this is not equal to null, then it means that precondition has failed. So you should not update anything. All you should do is just build the response builder and return it. But if it is a null value, then it means that precondition has not failed and entity tag is same, which means that no one has changed anything in for this record from the time the response was sent. So now you can update the file. So to update the file, here you have already the code, so you just copy paste, move this code in the else block, and then rb response builder is equal to response dot no content, return rb dot build. You can remove these lines. Now let us build this project. Now if I call the get request, say I call the get request for roll number 2, as you can see that it is returning the e tag value of 1512446463. Now in the put request, I will send this value in the if match tag. So let's write the put value here, if match, and give this value. Now before sending the put request here, I will change the student record of roll number 2. Let's say I make the age as 99. Now if I call this put method, you see that it is throwing the error a specified precondition has failed for this request, which means that since we have changed the record, so e tag is not matching, so it is not updating. So this is how you can implement conditional updates. If you don't change anything in the file, and then if you send a put request, then that put request will successfully update the file.